Now that we have our blank canvas all set up, there are a few things within Photoshop that we can change just to make the experience of designing a lot easier, especially when we get later on into the post-design process. But the first thing that we want to do is save the file. So the easiest way to do this is either by going into File, Save As, or as you can see, the shortcut there is Shift plus Control plus S. So we're going to use that shortcut there, Control Shift S, and it will open up this little menu where we can save the file, put in any name that you want. I've just chosen to do 21draw_Elliot, and feel free to save it wherever you want as well. I'm just saving it to my desktop. We're going to make sure that the type is Photoshop here, hit save, and then you should be able to jump into that file and have that ready to go. This just means that now we can continuously save over our project whenever we do kind of big changes, because the worst thing that we can imagine is the file crashing when you are halfway through the design and having to start over again. The amount of times this has happened to me, I could not count how many times, to be honest, so I make sure to save the file every time we jump in. Essential thing to do. So this is our generic Photoshop layout. If yours doesn't look like this, a good way to kind of get it to this point is by going up into the top bar and clicking Window here. There are a bunch of different windows here, but what we want to do is go to Workspace, and I'm just on the Essentials default one here. If it looks a little bit different, maybe you've played around with Photoshop a little bit already, you can just press Reset Essentials, or if you've got a setup that you already like, feel free to just keep that. We're just going to set up the kind of the space that I like to use when I design, so feel free to follow along. But we're just going to be using Essentials default for now. Now, there are a few of these windows that we would like to add, and I'll explain each one as we go through. But first, to just give you an idea of what all of the different toolbars do, we can do that as well. So on the left here, this is our main toolbar. As you can see, Photoshop isn't too good at explaining what each of the tools are. Rather than listing the actual name of the tool, there are just symbols. So a lot of Photoshop comes down to muscle memory, which is why it can be quite intimidating when you're just starting out and just looking at this kind of blank file with a bunch of different symbols and colors and all this stuff. So I can understand if you're intimidated, but it's actually quite simple. Like I was saying before, I only really use like 10% of the tools on offer anyway. So it's not too much of a deal if you don't ever figure out what all of these do. For example, I have no idea what the history brush tool is. I'm sure it's very cool, but I just don't use it. So we'll go through some of these tools later when we need to. And then here, these two colors here will usually be black and white for you. By double clicking on any of these, you can basically open up this little color picker here. This is going to be our foreground and background colors. We'll look more into that later, but just to give you an idea of what those are, that's what they are. Our top toolbar here, this not the very top toolbar, but just the second one down where this little home icon is, will change depending on which tool that you use. So these are your main tools, and then these are the kind of sub tools within that main tool set that you can use depending on what you need, right? So if we use this rectangle tool here, for example, before we make the rectangle, we can change the fill, we can change the stroke. There are just more things to do within that tool. So that's what that top bar is for. The top bar is where we can control a lot of the bigger picture things, file, edit. For example, those are the big changes file is when we're making new files, exporting, saving, editing is for things like transforming an object, changing the size of it. There are some print presets, some preferences, some essential stuff like that. And the rest are more to do with each certain layer that we create and how we can specifically edit them. Like in the layer tab, for example, we can add new layers, create new layers. The image tab, we can go into and do brightness, contrast, exposure, hue and saturation, things like that. And the filter tab, there are a bunch of different cool things here, like being able to add noise, blurring an image, for example. So we'll get to these as we need to. And now on the right side of the document here, as you can see, there are a bunch of different little panels. Now, these are completely customizable. When we were opening the window before, all of these from 3D down to version history, these are all panels, right? And we can add, remove, and change them depending on what we need. So usually if there is something that you feel like is missing, it might be in these panels here, and it will just give you more options to edit whatever image you're doing. So for now, with the basic one, we have in the top here, this is Photoshop kind of automatically combines a lot of the ones to do with certain themes. This one is mainly color. We're going to keep our little color one here. Feel free to drag it out if you like to see the color picker all nice and big like that. There's also swatches, which we won't use too much, gradients, which we won't use again, and patterns too, but those are some options that will just be up there for you. The next one down is the properties tab. This one is very important. This one will control a lot of the smaller elements for a lot of the layers. We'll use that as we go on. There's also an adjustments tab, which we won't touch, but you can basically use any of these to change a lot of the image, much like the image adjustments here. Kind of they're tied together. And then there's this libraries tab, which we'll be talking about later, which is a very useful feature. Just to give you a very brief rundown before we do it later, as you can see, I've saved some colors here that I'd like to use for my YouTube channel, which basically means that whenever I click one of these, it will change my main color here to be that color. So rather than typing in the hex code, for example, which is this little letters and number code here that dictates which color it is, I can just click each of these and I have them saved, and I can just bounce back and forth between them as we go on while designing. Very handy feature, and when we're looking at choosing some colors for a design, we'll definitely be using that. Just down from that is our layers panel. This is arguably the most important panel within Photoshop. If you've ever used Procreate or another kind of drawing, illustrating program like that, that is digital, you'll know about a layers panel of some sort. What this does is we can just separate each of the elements onto different layers. Some things like text will have their own layer automatically, and other things like a blank layer can be used to paint and use brushes and shapes and stuff like that. It just means that we can keep the file neatly organized and also control where things sit on the document. You know, what is at the front, what is behind that, and being able to change that is important. So the layers tab lets us keep all of that. This is also where our blending modes are, and we'll talk more about blending modes in the future too. There's also channels. I don't look too much into the channels, but this is just the RGB channels essentially. So all of the red, all of the green, and all of the blue in your document, you can kind of separate them if you want. And then there are paths too, which we haven't created any yet, and we most likely won't, but this is for the pen tool and for shapes mainly, where we are creating kind of lines that we can modify and move around, but we won't need to worry about that too much today. Another automatic window that pops up is this little sidebar here, which we can store even more of these panels. Like I said, it can be quite overwhelming with all this panel talk, but I assure you that the ones we will be using are essential to the process. This one here is the history panel, and the history panel will essentially document every change that you have made onto your file, right? So we have pretty much only just been setting the color, and when it says set color, it means that what I was doing before with the libraries, every time I set one of the colors here, it will change there. If I were to add a rectangle, for example, it says that I've used the rectangle tool. What's great about the history tab is that in Photoshop, pressing the undo button, which is Control or Command Z, will take us back one step. But if we want to go further than that, and specifically if we want to see exactly what we've done already, and we want to go back to a time when we haven't done certain things, we can do that through here. So I can go all the way back to the blank file, which is when we just had a new document and we saved over it. So that's pretty cool. We can definitely refer to the history panel a lot if you feel like you've made a mistake or you've gone wrong somewhere. That is all here for you. There's only two other panels that I would like you to add to your workspace. If we go into Window, the first one is going to be Character. So click on Character, and you realize that these two new panels have appeared here, one with an A and one with the little paragraph symbol, if you've ever seen that before. When we click on Character, which is the A here, this will give us a lot of options for when we're using text, and we can change text, which is a lot of fun. And then the Paragraph tool will let us change things like character alignment and paragraph spacing, which we'll also find useful. So having these is essential. And then we can also go back into Window here, and we can add in Navigator. So when you press Navigator, this new panel will appear. This might just help if you are kind of wanting to, I guess, navigate the design a lot easier. You can kind of zoom in and drag around so you can see if this was a filled in image, you would be able to see the different elements. Some people will just find this useful, especially if you're on a laptop or a smaller device rather than a big PC computer. Then this will be quite handy for you for sure. One more thing I want you to do is going to edit and then down here to preferences, and you can just press general. And then we are going to go into tools, which is the fourth one down. And right here, there is a little box that says zoom with scroll wheel. If you are using a mouse, I highly recommend keeping this ticked or ticking it if it's not. Tick that. And then what this means is that when you use a mouse and when you use the scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out just by scrolling. Usually it would just move the page kind of up and down, but it just means that when we're looking at the finer details of the design, we can just zoom into that by scrolling the wheel in and scrolling the wheel out. Another great little shortcut when it comes to viewing the page like this is by Command or Control 0. What that will do is just fit the canvas right into your workspace, rather than if you're in here and you zoom out and you're kind of annoyed by how much space there is and you just want to see it for exactly what it is. Control 0, and that will just zoom it right back to normal. I just use that to reset the file a lot of times. So hopefully all of this should give you a more general sense of what everything does. It can be quite intimidating, like I said, but it will make a lot more sense as we start to use each of the tools. So yeah, let's start using them.